I was born March 29th, 1943. My parents named me Pamela B. Sherwood. I'm told that my father liked the name B, that it was something to do with a famous actress, and that I would probably be famous too, so that's how I got my name. It's not a family name. I was born in Eager, and then my parents moved to Richville, which is a very small farming community that is between St. John's and Springerville. I lived there until I was 3, and then we moved to Snowflake, where I grew up. When we first moved to Snowflake, we lived in an old home that had been built by my grandfather Willis. My mother and father bought the property from them, and we lived in that home until about first grade, when that home burned to the ground. And then we lived in tents for a period of time while our new home was being built. We had a new home built on the same property where that old home was, and I grew up in that home from first grade until I graduated from high school. I don't have a lot of really early memories. I can remember one time when my father came home. He'd been off with the boys gambling, and I think I had been up studying, so I was up when he came home, and he brought the money out of his pocket to show me his winnings from his gambling that night. And I think I chewed him out and was my self-righteous self, and when he had showed me and told me how great it was that he had won this money, and I asked him what he thought about the other guys that he had won the money off of, and they had to go home to their families and to have lost their money. I don't think he was too impressed with my indignation toward him. The memory I have of that old home that we first moved to in Snowflake are really very little. I know that Kathy and I, Kathy is my sister, just older than I am, we slept in a bedroom upstairs together. I can remember that. And I had a really bright pink coat that I loved. And I remember in the living room there was a tall, skinny closet. And that coat hung in that closet. We got quite a few things out of the house when it burned, but I lost that really pretty pink coat, and I felt badly about losing my coat. That's about all I can remember about that house. When I was a child, our family played some outdoor games. We played kick the can, run sheepy run, an Andy-I over, where you would throw a ball over the house, divide into teams, and after so many catches, you would run around the house to catch the other team. We played dominoes and checkers. It was a big deal to play checkers with my father, and it appeared that no one could beat him. He was a really good checker player. When we were children, we had lots of chores to do because we were raised on a farm, and there was always lots that went on. We always had a milk cow, and we quite often sold milk to neighbors. And one of the jobs that I had was to strain the milk, which means that you brought in a bucket of milk, which my brothers had milked by hand from the cows, and we had to put it through a strainer to strain out any dirt particles that had gotten into it and fix it in the containers to go in the refrigerator. And then you also had to wash all that equipment so that it didn't go sour. That was probably my least favorite of the jobs that I had to do around the house. As a child, I wasn't much of a reader, but when I was in 7th grade, I remember reading all the Nancy Drew mysteries, and it seemed like there were a whole lot of them. So I read the whole series of Nancy Drew mysteries. There were 12 children in my family, but we always had plenty of food to eat because we raised chickens and pigs and beef. My father butchered both pigs and beef, so we always had plenty of pork. So as far as ever feeling like there wasn't enough food, that was never an issue in our home. We always had plenty of good food to eat. My mother made bread. on a regular basis. I always wished we could have bought bread instead of homemade bread, and my friends would love to trade me sandwiches, but we always had plenty of food to eat. When I was growing up, we didn't have a large variety of foods. In fact, Mother made bread once a week. On Monday, she probably made 12 loaves of bread and baked a pot of beans and did laundry all on that same day. So that was something that we knew was always going to happen. My mother made great enchiladas. She made great filled cookies. She could pull taffy like nobody else, and we always had wonderful saltwater taffy. So those are some of the memories I have of foods at home. I didn't really have any particular nicknames. It was just a takeoff on Pam. I had one friend who always called me Pammy, and to this day, my friend calls me Pammy when she sees me, even as an adult. I don't remember ever hitting or kicking. Kathy and I almost always had to do the dishes, and I do remember one time when we were doing the dishes together and we were fighting over who was supposed to do what, and I had a big long knife in my hand, and Kathy took hold of that knife and pulled it out of my hand, and I still have a scar to show for it. But at the time, Daddy was tending us, and Mother was in the hospital having Nina, and we knew we were going to be in deep trouble if Daddy found out about it. So I ended up with a big scar because we couldn't tell anybody. We doctored it as best we could and went on. But no, we didn't really fight and kick and hit when we were growing up. Well, I can remember when I went to high school that we had a few fads. One of them was when I went to high school, we had to wear dresses to school every single day, except Friday, and that was dress down day, and we could wear pants on Friday. And the fad at the time was to wear very full skirts and to wear lots of petticoats under those full skirts. And the wind blew a lot, so when we were walking from one building to the other, it was important for you to hold onto your skirt or you would find it blowing up over your head. That's one of the biggest things that I can remember as far as fads go. I really liked school. Math was one of my favorite subjects. I really liked math a lot, and I quite liked going to home ec. I liked learning how to sew, and I liked my home ec teacher a lot. So I liked those teachers. I had a great biology teacher, so I liked biology. But math was probably one of my most favorite subjects. At the same time that I liked math in high school, I did not like English, mostly because I did not have a good English teacher. The teacher was a man from my ward. His name was John Miller, and he just had no control in the classroom. So it was poor discipline. Consequently, I learned next to nothing in English, which left me ill prepared when it was time to move on to college. So English was probably one of my least favorite subjects. I had a lot of good math teachers. I did have one good English teacher my senior year of high school. He made us learn prefixes and suffixes and a lot of things that helped me when I went to college a great deal. Probably saved my bacon, even though I did poorly in English when I went to college and had a tough time writing themes and understanding symbolism in English literature and all kinds of things. I also really liked my home ec teacher. I think we were friends on top of her being a good teacher. So Mr. Prestwich, my English teacher, taught me a lot my senior year, and then Mrs. Loosely, my home ec teacher. There are some kind of funny memories about my classmates, and this is actually the memory that comes to my mind was when I was in 7th grade. I had two older brothers, Bill and Keith. And Bill and Keith used to tell me dirty jokes. I did not understand the dirty jokes, but people laughed at them, and so, trying to get attention, I'm sure, When I was in 7th grade, I would go to school and I would tell those jokes in class, and the boys in my class loved it. And when I was at my 50th high school reunion, one of the boys came up to me and said, "Do you remember, Pam, when you used to tell us those dirty jokes when we were in 7th grade?" So unfortunately, that's one of the things I'm remembered for, is telling bad stories. Probably because of the home ec teacher that I have, I was given a special award, which my family would laugh at today, but I was given the Betty Crocker Homemaking Award when I was a senior in high school. And when I graduated from high school and applied to college, I was given an academic scholarship to attend ASU. I also was elected to the National Honor Society, which were all wonderful things that meant a lot to me. When I was growing up, we had a family dog named King, a big collie dog. The dog was an outside dog. We never had an inside pet growing up. And I remember one time when I went home from college, I hadn't been told that King had died. And so I fixed him a bowl of food and went outside and called for him to come. And somebody had to call and tell me that King had died. But we had cows and horses and pigs and chickens, but we did not have really, except for that one dog, any domestic pet. I had a number of different jobs growing up. The very earliest job that I had was babysitting. I babysat for a number of people in town. I started off by earning 25 cents an hour, quickly got moved to 35 cents, and then 50 cents. And I think when I quit, I was probably earning about 75 cents an hour. I did lots of babysitting, earned enough money to buy my own clothes and do the things that I needed to do. After that, I went to work probably about my senior year of high school. During the summer, I worked in Holbrook first at a restaurant. And then I worked at a 5 and dime store. And then one summer I worked in a newspaper office as a proofreader. Those were my early jobs before I graduated college and became a teacher. Wow. I hate for my grandchildren to have to know this, but when I was young, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on not dating until you were 16. So I probably had my first date when I was about 14. I didn't date a lot, but I did have several dates then, and then as time moved on, I didn't date at all. I was kind of the wallflower. When I graduated from high school, I left Snowflake and went to Tempe, Arizona, where I attended Arizona State University, and I graduated from ASU with a degree in elementary education. One of the main reasons I went to college was because I had always, from the time I was in 3rd grade, I wanted to be a teacher. And at that time, the only way to become a teacher, of course, was to go to college. So that was my goal, was to become a teacher. So from the time I was very small, I had planned to be a teacher. My spouse and I met at ASU at a dance at the LDS Institute. He was there with his cousin, Beverly Fuller, and Beverly was a good friend of mine, and she introduced me to Byde at a dance. So we met at a dance and still love to dance. Byde and I met each other in June of 1964. We got engaged in August of 1964, and we were married in December of 1964. So we knew each other for about 6 months before we were married. When Byde asked me to marry him, I was living in a trailer off campus. One summer I had to go to summer school in order to graduate in 4 years. And I remember him coming to the trailer, bringing a chocolate cake. On top of the cake sat an engagement ring. And He brought the cake. I don't really remember what he said, but it was with this cake with the ring on top of it that he came and asked me to marry him. After Byde asked me to marry him, we made plans and we decided we would get married during the school break. I was in my last year of college doing my student teaching, and we got married in the Mesa, Arizona temple on December 17th, 1964. There were a number of things. One of the first, very most amazing things was Jennifer had been a thumbsucker from the moment she was born. I think she was born sucking her thumb. And when it came time for her to go to kindergarten, I talked with her and told her that she was a big girl now, and because she was going to school, she didn't need to suck her thumb anymore. And I swear I never saw her suck her thumb again. She quit cold turkey right then, and I think that was a really amazing thing. Scott was a paper boy. Well, several of our children were. Jennifer threw paper, so did Doug and Scott, and maybe David. I'm not sure about David. But there were many times when Scott would come home late when he'd been out collecting, and he had been somewhere visiting with somebody that he was collecting from, and would come home telling us rather interesting stories. When Doug was little, he used to come running in from outside where he'd been playing, and he would come throw his arms around my neck and give me a kiss and tell me he just needed to come in to kiss me. David was our clown. He never quit talking. He always had a funny story to tell, and it was always interesting to be around him. Something that was really amazing about Julie was her piano playing. And because I don't read music myself, I wasn't much help with piano. All the children took piano lessons, but we lived in Texas when Julie was getting started good in piano. And because of the distance that I had to drive her, I always stayed at her lesson. So I knew what she should be practicing. Probably made quite a bit of difference in her being able to play the piano. And I can remember one of the first performances that I went to for Julie. I was moved to tears as I watched her play, just realizing the great amount of feeling that she put into playing the piano. And she has been amazing with what she's done with her piano playing. Last but not least, our baby Christopher was one of the most stubborn people I have ever known. In fact, I can think of an incident once when I told him to go out and mow the lawn, and he did not want to do it. I told him to get out there and do it anyway, and he insisted that he needed to speak with his father, and he needed to wait until his father came home. I told him no such thing was going to happen, so to get outside, and he wasn't coming in, and this was in the heat of the summer in Phoenix, not pretty. He went out and got under the car so he could be in the shade, and continued to wait for his father to come home so he would not have to mow the grass. Chris was always very independent, and I can remember him going out back behind a little building we had at our house in San Antonio and could play with his trucks and probably Star Wars men for hours. Chris has also amazed me with his ability to create, and early on in computers to fix probably wasn't a blog, but a web page about Star Wars. And he's still pretty amazing with what he does with computer and his independence in the variety of things that he does. So, musical instruments. Have I learned to play any? Not particularly. When I was in grade school, the music department had a saxophone, which I started to play, and I really liked the saxophone. However, I very soon lost the mouthpiece, and I was so very terrified at what was going to happen to me because I lost the mouthpiece. So I quit saxophone, and when it came time to turn the instrument in, the mouthpiece was down in the end of the saxophone. So if I had just brought it out and told somebody, I probably could have learned to play the saxophone. When I was in high school, I played the drums and actually marched in the band playing the bass drum. Since you didn't really have to read notes, you just had to know the notes in order to beat the drum when you needed to. So I could play the drum. Those are the only two instruments I had any experience with. As an adult, I tried taking piano lessons from Julie, and she was a great teacher, but unfortunately, I was not willing to spend the time that was necessary in order to become proficient on the piano. I preferred quilting, so that ended my musical career. Over the years, I've been extremely healthy, but unfortunately, I seem to have inherited arthritis from my family. My mother had lots of arthritis, and so early on when I was in college, I had an appendectomy. In fact, that was my senior year of college. I had an appendectomy, and one of my teachers actually registered for me. Later, I had a hysterectomy, and after that, I had some arthritis, destroy some bones in my feet. I had surgery and had screws put in one of my feet. After that, I had both knees replaced, and I also had a hip replaced. So I don't have really good joints, but I am healthy except for that. So those are the surgeries I've had in my life. I have a very strong hobby of quilting. I learned to quilt when I was about 40 years old. There was a woman in my ward who went with me and helped me pick out the fabric and taught me how to quilt. And it's something that I have really loved through the years. My mother is a quilter. I have 6 sisters, and all of them in one form or another quilt. So quilting has been something that has been a real great love of mine. You know, when I was growing up on a farm, there were, as I mentioned earlier, so many things that had to be done that probably one of the most valuable things I learned was the importance of work, of doing what you said you would do. Another interesting thing I learned from my mother, who taught me a lot of things, was that I could do whatever I set my mind to do, basically. Mother helped support our family by sewing, and I wanted to sew, but Mother really could not afford the time for any of us girls to spend time on the sewing machine because she was using it to feed us. But I learned by watching my mother that she could do just about anything with a sewing machine, make any kind of clothing or anything that she set her mind to do. And even though I didn't have the experience from her, mentally, I thought I was as smart as she was, which was so far from being true. My mother was very creative and could do about anything. But because I thought I could, when it came time for me to learn, when I had my own sewing machine, I was not afraid to try to learn because I had watched her do so many things. I can remember putting snaps on Western shirts that my mother made. She would have me put the pearl snaps on, and by the time she had made a shirt, I had put the snaps on one shirt. She was very, very fast. Raising children was a wonderful thing, and we learned lots of things from our children. Being a grandparent is so fun, just to get to see the grandkids, to watch them grow, to get hugs from them. It's really a great thing to be a grandparent, and I love each of my grandchildren. I'm appreciative of the times that we get to be around them and to watch them as they grow and develop. Raising children is a very personal, individualized thing. If I were going to give my children advice about raising children, I would tell them one of the most important things they can do is to love their children, and in addition to that, not forget one of the most important reasons, or one of the most important things that happened when we came to this earth to live, was agency. Heavenly Father gave us our agency, and it's extremely important that as parents, you give your children agency, teach them what is right, and then they need to choose. And there are several examples of me as a parent where I did not follow that principle, and it's something that has brought me regrets. So love them and make sure you're respectful of their agency. What is my biggest pet peeve? People being late is probably about my biggest pet peeve. It annoys me if I'm sitting in church and people come in late. I think it's very disrespectful. I was raised that you went on time. If my father were going to church and you weren't ready and it was going to make him late for church, he just would not go. So we were raised with very strict be on time. And then when Byde and I got married, he was even stricter about being on time. So that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves, is people being late, not doing what they say they will do. Key to a good marriage is trying to think about the other person and their needs, and being more patient than I am with your spouse. As a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I have been so fortunate to be raised and to be taught the principles of the gospel, and to know that I have a Heavenly Father who loves me and knows who I am. And I'm so grateful for the faith that I have in that knowledge of who I am and the miracles that occur in our life on a daily basis. And so faith has helped carry me through some really tough times, just knowing that He knows who I am and it has always got my back, and that if I will try to do what's right, He will continue to bless me.
Full name is Elvin Byde Fuller. Name Elvin is after my father, but he did not want to have a junior, so I'm not quite sure where my mother came up with it, but they named me Byde, and that's kind of it has been an interesting name, because I don't know of anybody else around that has that as their name. I've always gone by my middle name, and as we named our boys, we steered toward having them use their middle name rather than their first name. When I was little, when I would tickle my sisters, I couldn't say tickle. All I could say was tuck. So as a small child, I was always called Tuck because of that. When I was born in Mesa, I don't remember that first home. We moved away to Prescott when I was probably about 4 years of age. My family consists of 4 older sisters, and the one closest to me is 5 years older than I am. And I think they thought she was going to be the last child, and trying to somewhat name her after my father. Her name is Elva, but because of that age difference, I was kind of like, and the only boy in the family, I was kind of raised like an only child. Had a number of dogs, and never had anything like cats or anything of that nature, but dogs, I remember. In fact, we were sitting out in our front yard up in Prescott where we lived, and our house was on a curve, and it had a little Cocker Spaniel that was out in our yard, and this car speeding came around the curve, came up into our yard and ran over this, and it was still a pup, little dog. And after that, we had a type of dog that's called a chow dog, and this dog was already probably 2 years old when we got it, very aggressive. And one time we were sitting out on that same porch, And I don't know what started it, but the dog got mad at one of my sisters and tried to bite her. And that was the last time I saw that dog. My father took the dog to a vet and had it put to sleep. He was not going to have that type of a dog around his family. The nature of my father's work, we really didn't take off on vacations. He was a baker, and when I was first born, my parents had their own bakery. Then when we were in Prescott, he worked for someone else and ran their bakery. And when we moved back down to the Phoenix area, he worked for 2 or 3 different bakeries, but running their bakery shop. He was always in charge of them. Well, worked with my father. He had a garden, and I got assignments in there in terms of picking fruit or hoeing weeds, those kinds of things outdoors. While my sisters, their responsibility were inside the house, not outside the house. So they would keep the house clean, dishes, and all those types of things. Not particularly. I guess I was not a big-time reader as in school. Developed that interest in reading as I got older, but not when I was a small child. So probably more of math type things, curiosity type things of science, but not really English things. I think that I was always willing to get involved in whatever was going on. As a child in elementary school, I was probably always the smallest child in the class. That was the case until I finally, about my junior year of high school and going into senior year, I probably all of a sudden grew about 8 inches in a very short period of time. I'm not a tall person, obviously, but I was always kind of the runt of the school class before. I guess if I look back at that, when we moved to Prescott, lived in a home there, and my sisters, older than I was, they were very busy doing things and so on, and I was getting annoyed that they seemed to be ignoring their little brother. So I made a big announcement one day that I was going to run away from home. And they said okay, and so we had a tiny little overnight suitcase, and I started putting my things in my suitcase to run away, and they helped me pack to run away. Well, I took my suitcase and took off walking and got about 3 houses from my home, and this dog about the size of a German Shepherd ran up to his fence and barked at me, and I decided I didn't want to run away from home. I hurried back to the house, and that ended that episode. I received at Christmas time it was a 3-wheel, like a low-profile trike, and the way you would propel it, you'd have the 2 wheels in the back, and your feet would steer that front single wheel, but you would pull your arms forward and back to like help the gear to push the car along. So I like to get on that thing and see how fast I could stay on the sidewalk, but how fast I could go around the house on the outside. And my sisters would come out and accuse me of not doing my chores in the garden, but I told them I needed to practice with my bike, as I called it. No, I think part of it is my father working. In fact, he never went with me on a father-son's outing because of his baking business. So I was always farmed out to one of the other families in the ward. But I just remember one trip that we went with another family, and they were very into Dutch oven cooking and so on. So all that we needed to do was to arrive there, and it was a good Friday evening, Saturday opportunity to be with other people and also with our family together. I really enjoyed basketball. In fact, when I was fourth grade up in Prescott, they had little elementary school teams, and I played on the team where I was playing against sixth graders. When I was 14 years of age, the ward that we were in over in Phoenix, we were extremely good at basketball, and the other players were all obviously older than I was. So we got the opportunity to go to Logan, Utah, and play in the all-church tournament in basketball. And I think probably the reason I was in the game very long toward the end is we were quite a ways ahead of the team we were playing against. And I made some baskets that happened to get mentioned in the local Logan Press of this young 14-year-old boy shooting baskets and being successful with his team. I liked all kinds of music. When I was a teenager, they would have every Saturday in Phoenix a Saturday night dance. And so as a bunch of ward members together, we would go to one of these dances. And so I liked dances, the music that allowed you to dance fast. We called it jitterbug. Or also I enjoyed dancing slow, but primarily to dance fast. Well, I guess it would be inside in the kitchen area, because it had been defined that's older sister work. And so occasionally they would try to draft me in there. We had some fun experiences, putting away dishes and those kinds of things. We had a small kitchen table, and so when our family was around it, it pretty well jammed. No more spaces left around that table. But as my sisters were in the age of dating, they periodically would invite one of their boyfriends over to eat with us. So that meant we didn't put any more leaves in. They were already in the table, and so we would just kind of squeeze together. And I remember my brother-in-law, married to my sister Cheryl Vern, he got to the dinner table late, and my dad's garden had tons of tomatoes, and so he had already put tomatoes on his plate. And Vern, thinking that was the community plate, he picked up my father's plate and started taking tomatoes off of that plate and putting them onto his. And my father just sat there quietly, and everybody was staring at my father, wanting to know what he was going to do next. And when he finished, my father said, "Vern, do you need anything else?" And he then realized what he had done. But my father also, when they were a story told about him, President Kimball told of in Eden, Arizona, where my father lived before they came here to Mesa area, that President Kimball was a counselor in the state presidency in that state, and he was assigned to go to the Eden ward to be part of their ward conference. Because of sickness of a real small child, my grandmother stayed home, but she told her boys, my father was the oldest, Elvin, Lawrence, Devon, and a couple of cousins, you sit on the front row at church and you behave and you watch what that visiting authority does, and he will set the standard for you, what's correct. So my father, his brothers sat there, and President Kimball in his talk, I think the talk is called On Having Heroes in Our Life, spoke at priesthood meeting, and said it's funny, he was sitting there and he noticed all of these boys sitting on the front row simultaneously would raise their right leg over their left, raise up their left hand and touch their face or whatever it might be, but they did it all in unison. And then they discovered, or he discovered, those little boys are mimicking everything that I do. And my father, I think he was about 7 or 8, as the oldest one in the group and was the ringleader. And I never heard the talk from President Kimball, but my grandfather, who was the bishop in that ward, Tommy Fuller, remember telling me about that and what your dad did when he was 7 or 8 years of age. And you've never done those kind of things, have you? No, not me, Grandpa. I've never done anything like that. But my father says he claims it wasn't him, it was somebody else named Elvin Fuller, but not him. But just seeing my father as a normal little boy and grew up being able to be raised in a family that loved him, cared for him, that was, to me, has always been a great example to me. One thing that happened to me when I was born, they gave me the report of it obviously later, that the doctor, knowing that I had 4 older sisters and I was 5 years younger than my sister, just older than I was, when I was born, he called the radio station, KTAR, and had it announced that Elvin and Alberta Fuller has a new addition to their home, a son 5 years younger than the sibling just older than he is. And he's the only boy, and his name is going to be Byde Fuller. And his dad owns the bakery in downtown Mesa. Well, there were a lot of people who came to the bakery to talk to them about, you just had a little boy? Where did you get the name Byde? And oh, by the way, why don't we take a pie and take it home? So there was a financial benefit, but it wasn't the case why the doctor mentioned it. He just thought a human interest story of this family finally getting a boy after all those crummy girls. Oh, we played in our yards, whether it be my yard or the neighbors, much like Pam's types of games, where we would throw a tennis ball over the top of the roof, and if the other side caught it, then you'd run around the other side and try to hit somebody with that ball before they could get to the opposite side. If you were successful at that, now they were on your team, and you're trying to narrow it down to where you would end up with everybody on your side. And also kick the can was a game that kids played a lot. My sisters used to tease me when I would get sick, so that I would be upset in my stomach. They would accuse me, well, Byde, don't you know? And we had these propane tank outside of our house, quite large, and it would be like on its side, raised up, and that's you get it delivered by a truck that would come around. But they would accuse me how I was getting this gas that was causing stomach problems. Is I'd sit out on that tank and act like it was a horse. I would sit on it and yell and hoop and holler, and then I'd go in the house, and sometime later I'd claim I had a stomach ache, and they said, well, you're just getting gas from that tank you're sitting on. If you'd stop that, you wouldn't have that problem anymore. No, my father, as a baker, he constantly brought bakery goods home, and if he was at home and one of my sisters said, I'd certainly like a cake, rather than go back to the bakery, he would comment to them, here's $1, why don't you go down and buy a cake mix? Okay, he didn't cook that way. When he was making cakes or whatever, it's like mixing 100 pounds of flour, those kinds of things. But he brought home a lot of pastries of what he had made, and we had constantly those kinds of things, to a point where didn't particularly like white cake because we had it so much going in and out of our home. When we moved to Phoenix, and I happened to be then a 7th grader, from my house I would walk past the bakery my father was running, and then on to 7th and 8th grade at Whittier Elementary School. And when I'd go by his bakery, I would load up with 3 dozen or so dozen of donuts. So when I would get to school, there would be kids and teachers lined up along the fence line wanting to know if I would share with them the baking goods and these donuts. That, in fact, I a number of times would stand there as they were just bringing the donuts out of the oil, dipping it into chocolate or strawberry or whatever, so they were still warm from just being made. I always thought, because of cousins around farm animals and so on, liking that I wanted to get involved in being a cattle buyer for a large packing operation like Armor Meats or whatever. So in fact, when I was probably 8 years old, 10 years old, 9 years old, in that range, my father had my uncle take me to a cattle auction and bought me a calf, and we hauled it back up to Prescott, and I had fun raising my heifer, little white-faced calf. I guess I'll have to be truthful. When I was 15 years of age, I got a job at a grocery store called A.J. Bayless. The problem was, you're supposed to be 16 years of age to work. So I changed the year I was born from 1942 to 1941 on my application and got the job. And after about 4 months, the manager of that store said, "I'm aware, Byde, that you're not of age to work in our store, but since you're such a diligent worker, we're going to ignore that, but you should have told us how old you were when you applied for the job." In high school, this would have been my junior, senior year, I worked at a hamburger operation called Dash In Scottsdale, and learned to cook all kinds of things. We had hamburgers, hot dogs, made our own onion rings and those types of things. And the owner of that business was a hunting guide. So he would take people on hunting trips, deer hunting, javelina or hunting and so on. So I got the responsibility of running that business for him while I was still in high school. I met my wife at ASU at a school dance, the Institute, and proposed to want to date her. And she thought for sure, in seeing me, that I was some 16-year-old breaking into the college dance. And she didn't believe that I was a returned missionary. But after my cousin helped me validate that fact that I was a returned missionary, then we started to date, and I think our total involved in dating and getting to the point of marriage was about 5 months, something like that. I think that very fortunate in seeing a lot of people come into the church. The mission was then called Central Atlantic States Mission, and it covered Virginia and North Carolina. And during that 2-year period, saw way over 200 people come into the church during that time. Just watching your kids grow up, and watching them make changes in their life, and I guess get impatient. You want them to move along faster than what they might be, but it's amazing how independent they were, how much they were into making decisions, really correct decisions, even when they were young. This is pretty scary. All of a sudden you've got this small thing, Jennifer, for us as a couple to take care of that little child and make sure it's provided for and hugged and kissed. And we kind of went through that with each of our children as they were born, to get acquainted with them. Each of my children have definitely a slightly different personality, independent from the others in the family. And it's been a very enjoyable experience in seeing them grow up. Highly motivated to be busy all the time working on projects, and she'll bounce easily from one project to another and then come back and pick up the one she started with originally. I'm not quite as focused as she is in doing that, but she is very busy all the time. I think in looking at my parents, my mother, was very aggressive, very what I would call a red personality, much in charge in the home and so on. But my father, his characteristics, he was extremely laid back, did not react or overreact to situations that would come up regarding us as children or events in life. And I think I learned a lot from that in watching him, not to incite the situation that might be in the home any more than what it was. But I also admired my mother in how busy she was. She by far held more church positions than my father. I think she would hold about every ward and stake position that it was available to sisters. My father was more willing to be laid back, and he was active, but it was not like a scoutmaster or those kinds of things. And I think part of that was the nature of his job, that he would go to work every night at midnight because people who want donuts early in the morning, they had to be ready for him, connected with his bakery. But I think that they were a very, very good father and mother to the children. No, I do not have a college degree. I attended at ASU, didn't finish there, but when Pam and I got married, we moved to California in Fullerton or Anaheim area. And I first started out thinking I would finish school and went to Cal State Fullerton there and took classes. And while she was teaching, I then also got a job working for Disneyland. And then we came back to Arizona. I never went back to finish school. All of the family support, Pam's from a large family, and how much support from them, her parents and brothers and sisters and so on, came down from Snowflake to attend the wedding that was here in the Mesa Temple. And the wedding was performed by a close family friend, Leo Packer, that happened to be a counselor in the temple presidency. But then after the reception here in Phoenix, we then traveled as our family and went up to Snowflake to be part of a second reception that was held up there. And some of our wedding entourage didn't make it because there was a snowstorm and they couldn't make it through over the top of the rim and so on. But I just thought it was just a great support from all of our families on both sides. I'm very much into church books, doctrinal side of church books, and I collect, I guess I have I've never read Work of the Glory, that type of a book at all, but I have in my library over 500 church books that I like to read, go back and reread. And that's also, I would say, that's probably my hobby as well as, and it's not just I collect the book, I like to read in it, study it, mark it up, so it's personalized to me. I don't know what my children will do with all of these books, but there are a lot of them. Some of them obviously have been out of print for a long time. When I was playing basketball, playing church basketball. I got hurt. This is before I went on my mission, where I was jumping up and a player on the other team fell under me, so I hit the floor on my back. As a result of that, after Pam and I were married, I had to have back surgery and have some vertebrae fused in the lower part of my back. And then later, because of heart condition, I've never had heart attack, but they picked it up on a treadmill test that they thought they were going to go in and put a stent in my heart. But before they were through, when I came out of surgery, they had done a 6-way bypass surgery. And so I have some limitations, I guess, with that in terms of what I'm brave enough to do, but I'm able to be physically active from that. I remember a couple of my grandkids seeing me after I'd come back from the hospital, and they had cut me open from all the way up close to my neck, all the way down past all the lungs, that area, so they could do this open heart surgery. And on my legs, they harvested veins and arteries to put up in the heart area. And having one of those little grandchildren of mine wanting to know and pray that all of those scars would go away, that I wouldn't have to keep them. Well, they're still there, but I remember their prayers. I guess a little bit of, in the past, not now, doing a little bit of gardening, and had a rototiller and all those kinds of things connected to gardening, but we're not active in that anymore. So it'd be pretty well focused with church books, and Pam has encouraged me to get involved in indexing, and I've got involved with that, enjoy doing that, both indexing and arbitrating, doing indexing. And we'll do 4,000 to 5,000 index names a month. Arbitrating, I'm starting to do more of that, and there will be a couple of thousand names arbitrated, where you're looking at the work of 2 other indexers and deciding which is the appropriate description of answering the question, or the person, where they were married, spelling of names, and so on. Probably would go back to the heart surgery, not knowing really whether I would survive all of that once I realized what they were going to have to do. My father passed away of a heart attack when he was, I would guess probably 64, 63, something like that. And he did it the easier way, I guess, if you want to die from a heart attack. He went to church one morning, went to priesthood meeting. In the opening exercise of priesthood meeting, he had his heart attack and just laid over in the chapel on the bench where he was at. There was a doctor in the ward that was sitting immediately behind him that was capable of taking care of him, but they could not revive him, and he passed away very quickly. He was really gone before they got him to the hospital. I think that because of support from my wife, as we've talked about things, there haven't been what I would call overwhelming decisions to make. And we've been able to live all over the country, go to California, to Oregon, back to San Diego, to Connecticut, back to Arizona again, to Texas and back. And there's been great people wherever we have lived that have been a support system to us, as well as sensing that similar support from our own families, wherever they might be, back in Arizona. I have found Salt Lake was a special place. There's so much going on there. We went there on a mission, and the time that we were there and around Temple Square, that was pretty special to me. extremely high. Raised in an LDS family, attended church. My father always wanted to be on time to church, and so we never had a problem in finding a place to sit at church because we were there early. And also being introduced to church books and having a high interest in reading those. I guess the only uncomfortable thing connected with the church would have been my baptism. Went down to the church. There was a group of us to be baptized. And they passed out all of the white clothes for people to be baptized. When it came to me, I had my white shirt on to wear, but they didn't have any white pants. So I wore faded Levi's or jeans to be baptized in. And at that point, I was kind of humiliated. They had white clothes on, but I didn't get to wear white clothes when I was baptized because they ran out of the white pants. That I've been active in the church, had opportunities to serve in a lot of different types of positions in the church, and tried to be diligent, faithful in each of those opportunities of service to other people. When a company called Photomat had about 15 stores, and these were little buildings that sat in a parking lot, so people could drop off their roll of film and it would be picked up and taken to a large processing plant to be developed. And I started the operation side of that business. And then we were from there, they sent us to Portland, Oregon. When we came back to San Diego, they asked me if I wanted to get involved in the real estate side of that business, which I did, and eventually became vice president of real estate. Left them when we had about 5,000 stores nationwide. Came back to Arizona, and then when I left working in the corporate world doing that, then spent my time putting retail tenants in shopping centers, representing them and finding locations, negotiating the lease, finding them financing, and so on. In closing, I'll make a couple of suggestions to my children and grandchildren. Is always try to find opportunities to be of service to other people. In our family, when our kids were growing up, we did that a number of times, the 12 days of Christmas and that excitement of doing those kinds of things. But also as a family, look for opportunities to do things for other people, anonymous. You don't need to put a sign, this is from the whichever family, but just to be concerned about other people, and as a family, not individually all the time, but as a family, to try to do things to lighten their burdens. And it'll be interesting how much comes back. People not even realizing that you were the one involved, of them trying to lighten your burdens as well. But to show love to people by doing that. And also learn to be kind and gentle with each other, and let your siblings make mistakes, but still be very, very supportive of them.
I would have to agree with the things that Byde said as far as serving others. I don't think there's anything that brings you greater satisfaction than being able to serve other people. And certainly as members of the church, we have a vehicle that provides opportunities for us to serve in every way. If you do take advantage of those opportunities, it will be a great blessing to you in your life. Some things that I've learned through life that could be helpful to you is that we came to this life to learn and grow, and the way we do that is by having challenges. and to know that those are a really important part of this life. It's what we came here for. So when you're having a challenge, just remember it's for your growth, and that everyone has challenges. Heavenly Father doesn't love one person more than he loves another person. We're all going to have our Abraham experience. And what your Abraham experience is going to be just right for you. Heavenly Father knows you, and he knows what you need. So we need to be careful about comparing ourselves to others, and to be grateful for those opportunities that we have for growth, even to the point of in our prayers being grateful. So if you can remember to do that, it will be a great blessing to you. Our last conference, we were given counsel from our prophet to read the Book of Mormon and to read from it daily, and that's another thing that I would say will be the greatest blessing to you if you will do that. It will be a huge influence for good in your life. I just want each one of you to know what a privilege it is to be a mother and a grandmother, and how grateful I am to be part of your family and to be able to associate with you, and for you to know that I know that Heavenly Father loves each one of you, and no matter what you do, he will continue to love you and wants you to be able to come home to him. We're also grateful to Chris for taking the time while he was here working to make this video for each one of you, and hope that it will be a blessing and helps you in your life, that there might be something that we've said that will be an influence for good in your lives. So just know that your father, grandfather, and I love each one of you very much, and how grateful we are for you. And that's all for this time. Maybe we'll get to do it again. I love you. Bye.
I'm trying to love my neighbor. I'm learning to serve my friends. I watch for the day of gladness when Jesus will come again. I try to remember the lessons he taught, then the Holy Spirit enters into my thoughts, saying, love one another as Jesus loves you. Try to show kindness in all that you do. Be gentle and loving in deed and in thought, for these are the things Jesus taught. I'm trying to be like Jesus. I'm following in his ways. I'm trying to love as he did in all that I do and say. At times I am tempted to make a wrong choice, but I try to listen as the still small voice whispers, love one another as Jesus loves you. Try to show kindness in all that you do. Be gentle and loving in deed and in thought, for these are the things Jesus taught. Love one another as Jesus loves you. Try to show kindness in all that you do. Be gentle and loving in deed and in thought, for these are the things Jesus
Chris, our baby Christopher.
Our baby Christopher.